Creepypastas. These short, disturbing stories ruled the early internet, leaving their mark on a generation of young readers, but their reign didn't last forever. While creepypastas was once the king of digital horror, it has now been taken over by other forms of online scares, like analog horror. But what made creepypastas blow up so fast, and why could that era never come back? Today, we'll dive into the rise and fall of creepypastas, and how the sheer amount of content online has made kids today immune to fear. This is the story of creepypastas, from its meteoric rise to its slow demise. To understand why creepypastas took off so quickly, you have to remember what the internet was like in the early 2000s. It was still relatively a new space full of mystery and anonymity. There was no fact-checking sites, no content creators debunking stories. Information was unregulated and rumors could spread like wildfire. This atmosphere was perfect for the rise of creepypastas. The stories, often dark and twisted, would be shared across forums, copied and pasted again and again. And that's where it gets the name, creepypasta. It comes from the combination of creepy and copypasta, a term used to describe a text that was copied and spread online. Some of these stories became internet legends, such as Slenderman, Smiledog, Jeff the Killer. They were the viral horror stories of their time, and they resonated deeply with kids and teens because they felt real. These weren't like polished horror movies we see in theaters. They felt personal, like you were hearing a dark secret past from one user to another. Take Smiledog, for example. It's just a simple image of a dog with a terrifying grin and an accompanying story, but it was enough to spook kids across the internet. Why? Because it wasn't just about the picture, it was about the mystery behind it. There was no clear origin, no way to fact check whether this image had any truth to it. That ambiguity made it terrifying. It's the same thing with Slenderman, which went from a simple Photoshop creation to a myth so powerful that people started to believe that it was real. Hell, even I thought that shit was real when I was a kid, and looking at it now, I felt so dumb because I always thought I was gonna get caught by Slenderman. In this era, the internet was still a wild west. People didn't immediately question everything they saw online. Creepypastas thrived because it played on that uncertainty. Every story felt like it just had enough realism to make you wonder, could this be real? It was that little silver of doubt that kept people hooked. Creepypastas didn't just succeed because of its content, it thrived because of the communities that formed around it. In the early 2000s, the internet wasn't the well-oiled machine of content creation and consumption that it is today. It was fragmented, full of nicked forums and message boards, where people with specific interests gathered to share ideas for the fans of horror. This was a golden opportunity for everything about creepypastas. These spaces became breeding grounds for some of the internet's most iconic stories. Whether you were scrolling through 4chan's, Twitters, or anything back then, boards, or lurking on the Creepypasta wiki, you weren't just a passive observer, you were part of a community that was actively shaping the landscape of internet horror. Fans didn't just consume creepypasta stories, they contributed to them, critiqued them, and even added a new layer to existing myths. Take Slenderman, for example. The character was originally just a spooky figure created for an online contest, but the community didn't let it end there. People started adding their own encounters with Slenderman, making fan art, and even creating entire mythologies around him. Soon, he wasn't just a character in a creepy Photoshop image, he was a full-fledged internet legend. Other stories follow the same path, Jeff the Killer, Smiledog, or the Russian sleep experiment, all gained traction because they were shared, debated, and expanded upon fans. These communities weren't just passively consuming content, they were shaping it. Each user had the chance to become a storyteller, adding their own voice to the collective narrative. And that's what made creepypasta feel so personal and so powerful. It was like the urban legends we told around the campfire, but just on a global scale. You didn't just read a creepypasta, you became part of its legacy. While creepypasta's impact on internet horror was undeniable, it wasn't without its darker moments.
ABC News exclusive. You're going to meet a young woman with an extraordinary story of survival. She was the victim of a crime that shocked parents everywhere. Stabbed 19 times, allegedly by two of her friends, who said they were trying to impress a fictional internet character called Slenderman.
One of the most infamous incidents tied to creepypastas was the Slenderman stabbing back in 2014, which sent shockwaves through both the horror community and the mainstream media. In Waukesha, Wisconsin, two 12-year-old girls lured their friend into the woods and brutally attacked her, later telling the authorities that they did it to appease Slenderman, a fictional character they had to read about online. The attack was horrifying, not just because of the violence, but because it showed how deeply some people had become immersed into the world of creepypasta. The media quickly latched onto the story, painting creepypasta as a dangerous influence on the young, impressionable minds. For parents and mainstream audiences who were unfamiliar with the internet culture, the idea that fictional horror stories could lead to real-world violence was terrifying. But within the creepypastas community, reactions were mixed. Some distanced themselves from the incident, arguing that the stories were just harmless fiction, while others questioned whether certain types of contents could blur the line between reality and imagination. Creepypasta wasn't the first form of media to be blamed for violent acts. Over the years, horror movies, video games, and even music have been accused of influencing real-world violence. But the Slenderman stabbing brought this conversation into the digital age, forcing a new generation of creators and fans to reckon with potential consequences of their work. In the aftermath, the creepypasta community became more aware of the impact their stories could have on the young or impressionable audiences. While most fans could separate fiction from reality, the tragedy highlighted the importance of responsible storytelling in the online space. Creepypasta wasn't inherently dangerous, but in the wrong hands, even the scariest stories could become real. Fast forward to the late 2010s, and something began to change in the horror community. While creepypasta continued to circulate, a new type of horror was emerging on platforms like YouTube. This genre was known as analog horror. It took a very different approach. Instead of relying on text-based stories, creators used the aesthetics of old VHS tapes, fake TV broadcasts, and distorted visuals to create unsettling atmospheric horror. Analog horror isn't just about telling a story. It's about immersing the viewer in a world where things feel slightly off. It's unsettling in a different way. You're not just reading a story, you're watching something that looks like it could have been from an old TV broadcast that was never meant to be seen. That grainy, lo-fi aesthetic creates kind of a dread that text alone can't convey. Unlike creepypastas, where the scares came from what you imagine after reading the story, analog horror puts you right in the middle of the nightmare. The VHS glitches, distorted audio, and cryptic messages all combine to make the viewer feel they've stumbled onto something they shouldn't have. It's horror that feels like it's coming from a forgotten past, a piece of media left behind in a world where technology has moved on. With the rise of platforms like YouTube, these videos quickly spread, offering a new way to experience horror. No longer just a series of worlds on a screen, analog horror created a more immersive and visual experience that tapped into a collective fear of obsolete technology and hidden messages. In this new age of horror, the visual medium was king, and creepypasta's simple text-based format just couldn't keep up. So why is it that creepypastas, despite its massive popularity in the 2000s, could never return to its former glory? A major reason is the internet itself. The internet has changed. It's faster, more interconnected, and way more saturated than it has during creepypasta's heyday. One of the biggest factors is the rise of instant debunking. Back in the early 2000s, there was a lot more room for mystery. It wasn't as easy to fact check a creepy story with just a few clicks. But now, within minutes of a new creepy story going viral, there are dozens of YouTube channels, Reddit threads, ready to analyze, debunk, and break it down piece by piece. Even if a new creepypasta emerges today, it doesn't have the same chance to grow into something truly scary. Even if a new creepypasta emerges today, it doesn't have the same chance to grow into something truly scary like how it was back then. The illusion is shattered almost instantly. The internet is too quick, too skeptical. Everything can be picked apart, explained, and fact-checked within hours, leaving no room for that lingering fear or uncertainty. Back then, you might have stumbled onto something like smiledog, Slender, SONIC.EXE, Eyeless Jack, stuff like that at night, and it would linger in your mind for days. But one day, one search on Google or YouTube will tell you exactly where that image came from, who created it, and how the whole thing was staged. The magic, the mystery is just gone. The internet has simply become too self-aware. Another reason why creepypasta's golden age is behind us is the sheer volume of horror content today. Back in the early 2000s, the horror landscape online was sparse. Finding a good creepy story felt like stumbling upon a hidden treasure. But now, there's an endless stream of horror content across every platform. From TikTok horror trends to YouTube gaming streams and video essays breaking down each horror movie ever made, there's no shortage of scary content. And with that, we've become desensitized. Horror is everywhere, and kids growing up now are exposed to it at such a young age that it's really hard to scare them. Like, take the example of The Exorcist back in the 70s. It was considered one of the scariest movies ever made. People were fainting in theaters because it was so intense. But if you showed The Exorcist to the kids now, like today, many wouldn't really flinch or find it very scary. They're seeing too much horror that it doesn't have the same shock value as it used to. The more horror we consume, the harder it becomes to scare us. And with the internet as oversaturated as it is, creepypasta can no longer compete in the same way as it did before. It's drowned out by everything else. While creepypasta may never return to its former glory, its influence on internet horror is undeniable. It was the spark that ignited the interest in online horror storytelling, laying the groundwork for what would eventually evolve into analog horror, ARGs, and even major horror franchises. Creepypasta may no longer dominate the online horror scene, but its legacy lives on. It showed us that the internet could be a place where fear and imagination could run wild. Without creepypasta, we might never have seen the rise of some of the most innovative horror content creators of today. In the end, the essence of creepypasta has evolved. While the mystery that once surrounded those early stories have faded, the impact they had on a generation of horror lovers will never be forgotten. As we look into the future, it's clear that online horror is evolving in ways we couldn't have imagined during the early days of creepypasta. New technologies like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and deepfakes are opening up exciting and terrifying new possibilities for this genre. The new way we experience fear in digital spaces is rapidly shifting, and these advantages are redefining the boundaries of horror storytelling. The age of classic creepypasta may be over, but its spirit continues to haunt the digital spaces we explore today. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment, because I like reading your guys' comment and like the feedback. I love it. The positive words and stuff. I appreciate y'all. And if you like this like creepypasta stuff, I want to do like a thing where I talk about scary facts the whole month of October maybe. So if you have any ideas, leave that down below also. And yeah, that's me, and I'll see you guys next time I have a video done.